I'm Shane Morris with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. What makes a great leader? Life experience? Great mentors? Spiritual discipline? Today on the BreakPoint Podcast, we present a Colson Fellows webinar discussion between Colson Fellows National Director Bill Brown and Michael Lindsay, himself a Colson Fellow and president of Gordon College. Lindsay is the author of View from the Top, an inside look at how people in power see and shape the world. Before we get to Drs. Brown and Lindsay, I want to let you know that we're now accepting applications for the Colson Fellows at colsonfellows.org. The program is all about preparing Christians in all walks of life to become leaders in their spheres of influence. During their 10 months of intensive worldview training, Colson Fellows attend webinars with Christian leaders, like the one you're about to hear with Dr. Michael Lindsay. They attend 3 residencies, read classic books on Christian worldview, and prepare a concrete plan for ministry. Again, you can apply at colsonfellows.org. Now here are Drs. Bill Brown and Michael Lindsay.
Well, I'd like to talk about leadership a little bit. Your book is a wonderful book, and why don't you tell a little bit about how you conceived the book and how you actually put it together with all those incredible interviews, and then we'll maybe disseminate some of the key truths from your research.
Sure. So it actually grew out of my doctoral work at Princeton, and so I'm living proof that you can write a dissertation that your wife will describe as actually interesting. Interview 550 senior leaders in government, business, and nonprofit life. I originally thought I would try and do 40 interviews, but they just kept coming and coming, and I was very blessed. I interviewed former Presidents Carter and Bush, cabinet secretaries like Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice and Donna Shalala, senior military leaders like Wesley Clark, who is the Supreme Allied Commander at NATO, as well as college presidents, the presidents of Harvard, of Stanford, of Princeton, and leaders of the larger nonprofit organizations, American Cancer Society, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and then about 250 CEOs, including 100 of Fortune 500 companies. So it was a wonderful cross-section of different leaders in different sectors, different ages, different experiences. It actually took about 10 years to collect all the data. And View from the Top is sort of a top-line overview of some of the leadership trends that I picked up by doing qualitative interviews and then a lot of quantitative analyses of their lives and their backgrounds and their stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were some of the key truths that you found in your research?
You know, it's interesting because I'm the father of 3 young girls, and I believe deeply in the importance of parenting. But I found in the course of my research that there wasn't a single variable that we could measure in somebody's life before age 20 that could be statistically significant in their likelihood of assuming leadership later on in life. And so what that suggests to us is that, the door is still open for people up until age 20, that they can come from a rich family, from a poor family, highly educated or not very educated. They could be a jock in sports, or they could be an artist. They could be very sociable, or they could be much more reserved. But the decades of the 20s and 30s are really critical for your leadership formation. And so part of the reason why I love higher education is that I get to work with that age group and to see the impact that we can make. And in those 30s, those are really critical ages where you can see people's trajectory rise in significant ways. And so if you're looking for somebody to mentor, I oftentimes tell people, start with somebody who's in their, mid-20s, right out of college or university, early career. That's when you can make a really significant difference in their life. And in fact, that's one of the key things that we found. So I was surprised that it didn't matter a whole lot what happened before age 20, but it mattered a great deal what happened between ages 20 and 40. That was an insight I was not expecting.
Now, did most of these leaders that you would consider to be successful, did they have a mentor?
Yeah, in fact, there's a subset of the 550 who we call platinum leaders, who were the really, really best. They led over a long haul. They had successful ventures, but they led with integrity. And in the book, I describe sort of how we qualified people. But let's just for now say they're really great people that you want to emulate. All of those individuals were able to name individuals who are mentors or sponsors in their life. So a sponsor is somebody who says, I'm going to really help you by recommending you myself. So a sponsor takes more of the initiative. In a mentoring relationship, it's typically the protege that's taking the initiative. And so we found some wonderful examples of people who made a very profound difference over the course of their lives.
So I guess your word would be to the Colson Fellows that are listening that they should indeed find and begin to mentor somebody in their mid-20s, right?
There's nothing more gratifying than getting a chance to feel like you make a difference in a young person's life. And, the Lord calls us to pour into the lives of people at different walks of life, in our churches, in our communities. But I will say, if you can take somebody who is 22 or 23 and help them for the next 3 years, the impact you'll have on their life and the life choices that they make is just exponential in impact.
That's right. Now, how many of these were people who are followers of Christ?
About 70% of the people that I interviewed, what I would consider sort of committed Christians.
And I guess as you, in the book, you kind of get into this, but you were able to see in some cases that faith made a huge difference in their character and the way that they led. And sometimes it didn't, right?
Yeah, the sad reality is that virtually all of the corporate scandals that have been perpetrated over the last 30 years have actually been at the hands of people who were church-going Christians. Now, I think we don't know what's going on in their heart. We don't know what kind of habits and practices that they have in their life. But Kenneth Lay, who was the CEO of Enron, was a Sunday school teacher in Houston. And so just because you're a Sunday school teacher doesn't mean that you're immune from the temptations of power or greed or lust or all the other besetting sins that we have to struggle with. And at the same time, I found that people who were regularly practicing their faith, so not just churchgoers, but people who had daily practices of prayer, of scripture reading, small group involvement, some form of accountability, those kinds of practices had a much more significant impact on the likelihood of them being able to lead with integrity and over the long haul.
But in your own life and in the challenges that you have, how has faith helped you, number one, in your own leadership, and number two, in your own desire to let your faith be determinative in identifying the work that Gordon does?
So one of the hardest things is that you're really trying to lead people. And what works for one person does not work for another person. And so in many ways, you have to recalibrate your posture, your style. You have to do different things for different people. And so much of what falls on my desk are, in some ways, intractable problems that other people could not solve. And so it falls to me to figure out, what are we going to do? And very rarely do things reach my desk that are black and white. Usually they're a deep shade of gray, where you're having to make a judgment call and say, in light of competing priorities, in light of competing resource demands, what's the best and highest use of what limited opportunities that you have? And I would say also, in my role, I have to make decisions about when we're going to hold the line and when we're going to extend grace. And it's rarely obvious to me because there's always extenuating circumstances. So, it would be my hope that on my better days, people could look on the inside of how I lead and to really know what's in my heart and my mind, and that it would reflect Jesus and how he would want me to live my life. Probably most times I fall very short from that. And if I can trace the moments when I feel that I'm not in alignment with the Spirit, it certainly has a direct correlation with the amount of time and energy I'm giving in my private devotional life. So I think prayer and Bible study is very important for me. A good friend introduced me to the Bible in 1 Year app that comes out of Holy Trinity Brompton in London, Nikki Gumbel. And that's actually been a really wonderful lifeline for me. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes, and it's a reading from the Psalms, a reading from the Old Testament and New Testament with some commentary that Nikki, who's the founder of the Alpha movement, does. And something about hearing scripture read in a British accent has a way of enchanting me, but it also takes me to a different place, and that's been really meaningful in my own leadership development. And then I would also say an active prayer life. So I try to really pray through my day and through the challenges, and I try to look a week or two ahead and to make that sort of a regular part of my daily practice as I pray. Because so much of the meetings or the conversations that I'm having are ones where I actually don't fully know what to say. And there have been actual moments when I've had to make a decision, and going into the meeting, I'm not really sure what to say in that very moment. I'm normally a pretty decisive person, but I will say that as I've moved into leadership of a complex organization like a university, so often the simple pat answers just don't really do justice to the complexity of the issue. And so I find that I'm having to live with a lot more ambiguity than I personally would like, and that I'm having to figure out how do I respond in a way that reflects Jesus' way.
How has your faith and leadership made an impact on your family?
Well, I'd like to think it's made a very positive impact on my girls. So I'm married to my wife. We've been married for 24 years, and we have 3 daughters. Our oldest daughter, Elizabeth, is a special needs kid. So she's 15, but she has profound cognitive disability. And so she has about the intellectual development of an 18-month-old. So she doesn't have language. She has problems with her internal organs. So if you saw a picture of Elizabeth, you would think that she's typical. But if you interacted with her just even for 30 seconds, you would quickly realize that she's special. And I think that having Elizabeth in our family and in our lives has softened me and helped me to come into contact with a degree of vulnerability in the world that previously I didn't fully appreciate. And I would say that Rebecca, my wife, does a wonderful job of helping to keep me humble and remind me of the more important things in my life. So I believe deeply in institutions. I pour into the institution that I lead, and I'm very committed to Gordon succeeding. But at the end of the day, it's more important to me the relationships and how I can invest in the students, but also pay attention to my family. We try to practice Sabbath rest in our family. That's a spiritual practice that's important to us. We try to encourage our girls to develop the right kinds of spiritual virtue and sensibilities. One of the interesting things, I imagine most people who are Colson Fellows have enjoyed some degree of success or achievement or recognition. And one of the great opportunities that's before us is helping our kids to know how to steward privilege and opportunity in a godly way. So how do you take the perks that come with being a manager of a group or of leading an institution or of having some responsibility or having a particular title, and how do you teach a 9-year-old to think about that in a way that would please Jesus? That's one of the things Rebecca and I have time working on. And some days we get it right, other days we don't, but it's an important part of our own spiritual journey.
That's great. We always saw that as our most important ministry was at home. Let's segue into higher education. You and I both have been presidents. You are a president, but I've been president of Christ-centered universities, and we were there for a reason. Now, you've also been at Rice as a faculty member, so you've seen what goes on in the environment there at a more of a secular university. Why are you so committed to what you could consider to be a Christ-centered higher education?
I certainly believe that Christians can be called to serve at institutions like Rice, and I'm very good friends with a number of people who are leading in those kind of institutions. But I think most American churchgoers have no idea the hostility that the typical faculty member has against Christianity. There's virtually any form of identity is acceptable in the academy except a really committed Christian. In fact, they'd be more accepting of someone who's a really committed Muslim or a more committed Jew, but to be a committed Christian is seen as anathema. So eventually I began to just say, I really want my life to be pouring into an institution that aligns with my values. And I actually happen to believe that the quality of the education that we offer at Gordon, and I can't speak for other Christian colleges, but at Gordon, I really believe the quality of what we offer is on par with the quality I experienced at Rice and when I was a grad student at Princeton. Now, Rice and Princeton had more resources, and they were able to do more things with those resources. But when I look at the core business of the academic training that was happening, I teach a class here at Gordon that is exactly similar to the class I taught at Rice and that I pioneered at Princeton. And the quality of the academic work that I get at Gordon is on par with the quality work I was getting at Rice every semester.
Thanks for listening to today's BreakPoint Podcast with Dr. Bill Brown and Dr. Michael Lindsay. I hope you'll consider applying for the Colson Fellows Program. Please come to colsonfellows.org for more information. For the Colson Center, I'm Shane Morris.